Hi, everybody. Michael Savage here with another incredible broadcast for your edification and listening pleasure. Today, we're going to talk about a very important topic, which is our children's health. In fact, our health as well. I've been writing and researching in this field, I would say, ever since the late 1960s. And I will talk about that in a moment. The reason everyone is interested in children and children's health right now is because of RFK Jr.'s wonderful work in awakening America to the nightmare of what is going on in this country. And I'll begin in a moment with a more formal look at all of this. I want to check my sites and make sure everything's running on X and on YouTube as it's supposed to be running. And yes, there we are, Healing Children Naturally. We're on X and we are on YouTube Live. So I can turn off my lower screen and turn on the chat line. I know many of you were looking forward to this broadcast because I had announced earlier I was going to talk about healing children naturally today. And many people sent their best wishes and they said, I have that book. And I bought the book when it first came out. And then later in the day, I went back into my library and found books that I had forgotten I had written on health, such as Bugs in the Peanut Butter, 1976, if you can believe it. And then some other books, which I'm not going to discuss in detail today. This is a very important topic, especially after Joe Biden's cleared dementia. This book was published in 1982. It set off a shockwave, and it was published in 6 languages. This, of course, is my greatest work of all and the least understood. It took me years of work in the tropics on this one. This was the granddaddy of them all, 1972. I remember working until 2 in the morning when I had a young child. Coming home late at night, I was pouring my mind into this one. But let's talk for a moment about healing children naturally, because that's the subject of the day as a result of RFK Jr.'s throwing his hat in the ring, so to speak, by quitting the race and joining the race. And he awakened America to the fact that 25 to 30% of young adults now have prediabetes. Almost didn't exist in my time, nor in his childhood. He was born in 1954, I believe. I was born in 1942. And in my time, it was almost unheard of for a child to have prediabetes. 25 to 30% of young adults now have prediabetes. 50% of young adults now are obese or overweight. Okay. 20% of teens have fatty liver disease. 40% of teens now qualify as having a mental health disorder. Do you think this happened by accident? Now, the reason I'm on today is because Greg Kelly, who is a host on Newsmax TV, a great host, wonderful man, had me on WABC today. Many of you listened to it. And Greg and I got along great because he's an honest guy, straight up. You know, real men are not competitive with men who have something to say. So he let me talk. He asked me questions I didn't have time to answer. But how did Americans become the sickest people on earth? How come we have the highest chronic disease rate on earth? How come 2/3 of American adults and children suffer from chronic health issues? How come? Well, it's got to do with our food, our medicines, and our lifestyle. 50 years ago, only about 1% of adults and children suffer from chronic health diseases. Now it's 66%. Do you realize what this is? We are the sickest people on the planet. Obesity is rampant. Our children are fat slobs. Now obesity is accepted as a norm when in fact it's not a norm. It's an illness. In Japan, the obesity rate is 3%. In America, it's 50%. Pre-diabetes, diabetes. Why is this not in the news? It's simple. The news is controlled by the advertising business, as is television, as is radio. And almost all the ads, as you can see with your own eyes, are for toxic drugs. How many times have I told you I cannot believe when I watch cable news, every other ad is for chronic, like Ozempic or Schmempic. I'm not picking on one drug. I never heard of such things as this. It's impossible. Instead of teaching people that food is the best medicine, I mean, we all know about exercise. Many of you are gym rats, and you're following fairly good diet. Some of you are misled into believing that the latest iteration of a diet is, the caveman diet. It's all stupidity. These are ignoramuses pushing an idea that will wind up with massive amounts of kidney disease in time. I don't want to talk about the caveman diet right now because it's another stupid hula hoop of an idea. People don't even understand what they're talking about. The kidneys are what break down proteins. So if you're going to eat an all meat or meat and poultry and eggs and nothing else, you'll probably die of kidney disease by the time you're 50. But, let me back up a bit. I've been at this a very long time, and I decided after I got out of the health book business, meaning writing health books, and believe me, I put my life and soul into those herbal books and homeopathy and health books. My whole life was involved. Then I got into radio in 1994. And by the time I was finished with radio, which is almost 27 years later, I was not that interested in the health field anymore. But now I am very interested in the health field. It may be my greatest legacy. And let me remind you of something else. Long after this election is over and the talking heads in the media have nothing left to say to you, let's say, God forbid, Harris wins, and there's a good chance she will, God forbid. Tell me what all the conservatives are going to talk about, how bad she is for 4 years? That's what you want to listen to for 4 straight years of how bad her policies are? We know how bad her policies are. We know how bad the Democrats are. They're going to be out of business. So what I'm trying to tell you is that a far more important subject is health, particularly our children's health, because an entire generation has been sacrificed on the altar of big pharma, and I should say big food, or however you want to call it. So let me go back to the beginning. And Healing Children Naturally, it's not available for sale. I'm not selling you a book right now. But when I brought this back up in the last day because of Kennedy, several publishers have asked me, can they republish the book? And I will be doing so, I hope, in the near future. I will be doing so in the near future. But I want to start with the opening quote to Healing Children Naturally right here. This is what I wrote when I wrote this book in 1982. Just as the undrawn sword is the mark of the best swordsman, so too is the best physician, one who relies least on synthetic drugs. As a nutritionist by training, I have not had to overcome an inherent bias in favor of prescription drugs. Food has always seemed the best medicine to me, especially as a preventive practice. That was the opening of the book. The second paragraph, I think, is also worth quoting. There is a tendency today for once drug-oriented physicians to proselytize about nutrition while recommending highly questionable glandular extracts and drug-sized doses of vitamins and minerals. These new converts seem to forget that, quote, nutrition also means food. Also means food. In my program of preventive dietetics, food is first, with minor vitamin and mineral supplementation as an adjunct. I'll go into that at another time. And in cases of minor illness, I wrote, we recommend modified diets in conjunction with herbal teas. And I included special diets in this book. I was very fortunate when I was writing this book to have come upon an organization, and I don't know if it still exists, up in the lower Sierra Nevada, which had diets, and I included them in the book. I think it was the Weimar Institute. I'm pretty sure of that. And I have diets in here for various illnesses that are pretty amazing, that they were treating people with these diets in their clinics, in their institute. Here, natural approaches for natural complaints: acne, allergy, appendicitis, asthma, celiac disease, colds, colic, colitis, and so forth, all the way up to whooping cough. And then there are recipes for resistors. It's a beautiful book. And I remember when I first wrote it, how I was so in love with it because I had a young child, two young children at the time, and I was trying to figure it out for them as well as for myself. So there's diets for prevention, but there were also diets for prospective parents. I want to talk about that as well today because many young women are giving birth First of all, a lot of people can't have children. Let me start with infertility and what infertility has to do with diet and nutrition and lifestyles to begin with. That's the first thing I want to talk about. Maybe I can't get to all of it today. Remember, my program is centrist, it's not extremist at all. Okay. These are important points in this time of hypermedication and people losing all concept of diet and nutrition and thinking only exercise and drugs will do it for them. So I talk about diet to improve fertility in men. Semen counts can be improved with various vitamins. I then talk about women who used to get good advice from their relatives, and now terrible things are happening to pregnant women. Terrible things are happening to women with postpartum depression that can be treated almost in days with the right diet and nutrition instead of drugging them to death and putting them on antidepressants. It's a nightmare. You know, there's an old idea of the fetus as a parasite, believe it or not, that came back because of the false notions that children shouldn't even be in the mother's body. So the fetus, would you believe that as recently as, I don't know how many years ago, medical schools taught that since the growing fetus was merely a parasite, it would get all that it needed from the mother. Can you believe that? Believe that, regardless of the mother's nutritional status? We all know that this is untrue, because if the mother is not adequately nourished, the chances for maldevelopment of the child are great, particularly the chances for development of an underweight child or a child with serious neurological and intellectual handicaps. There is also danger for the mother who is not properly nourished during pregnancy to get very, very sick. The first 8 weeks being a very critical time, and that's a time when most mothers today know not to drink alcohol. Even the most rudimentary mother knows that fetal alcohol syndrome is related to alcohol, and most educated mothers will not drink when they're pregnant, which is a good thing, thank God. But there's so much more for them to know. And I'm not going to be able to do all of this today. I told you I'm going to reissue the book when the time comes. This was a gift to the world. If I go into the history of the dollars I earned on it, you'll be very depressed to find out. First, the book was stolen by a publisher who gave me nothing. Then a foreign publisher stole the book. It's happened all the time, over and over again. But I think that I want to get back into this field in this phase of my life. I'm asking myself, how do I write the rest of this movie? You hear what I just said? How do I write the rest of my movie? If I was writing a movie about this man's life, me, and I'm 82 years old, and I've done a lot of things, how would I write the rest of this movie? How does this life go forward? How does it come to a conclusion? And what is this man's legacy? That's all I'm thinking about. So one of the things that I want to go back to is the early days that drove me so hard to give to the world. And Healing Children Naturally is the one I want to talk about now because it's in the news. Let's be clear. RFK Jr. did a lot of good for the world by pointing out how sick we are and how big pharma and big ag are killing us, frankly, in plain English. And it's very important that you listen to him. 18% of American teens have fatty liver disease. That's 1 out of every 5. How is that possible? It's impossible. When I was a kid, fatty liver disease was only seen in late-stage alcoholics. Why are cancer rates skyrocketing in the young and the old? Did you know that young adult cancers are up 79%? Young adult cancers are up 79%. 1 in 4 American women are on antidepressant drugs. 40% of teens have a mental health diagnosis. 15% of high schoolers are on a speed called Adderall. 500,000 children are on antidepressants known as SSRIs. Well, again, I knew this was coming. We tried to stop it in the 70s. I grew up reading the greats and some of the great writers who knew some and not all. None of us know it all. Many of us grew up on Adele Davis, who herself died of a very serious type of rapid developing cancer. And I don't want to talk about Adele Davis. She was a pioneer before my time, but she did a lot of good. But she was obsessed with folic acid, and she died from a cancer, which, by the way, is fed by high amounts of folic acid. It's an interesting story. I wrote about it, interestingly, in another book, which I don't have of mine, called The Skeptical Nutritionist, which was published by Macmillan in 1983. And I did a nutritional autopsy of Ms. Davis and related it to the folic acid of the time. So again, I can't do all of this in one X or YouTube broadcast. I can't do it all in one single book. I've been sort of a public health worker my whole life, beginning as a social worker, then as a teacher, then as a health writer, then as a researcher, and then as a talk show host. And you may say, well, you're right-wing talk shows. Yes, I'm proud to tell you that was also social work trying to save America from the disease of socialism and or communism. But that's a separate story. I want to stay focused on what I am trying to get across to you today on healing children naturally. No, it is not available. It may be found online in used copies. I'm going to reprint this. I have one or two publishers who are dying to do it, or I'm going to have it redone, and it'll be out there. I don't have to modify one word in this book. I looked at it. It's amazing. There's nothing that has to be rewritten in here. So rather than giving you the whole book, I can't do it. I'm giving you an outline of healing children naturally as it relates to the new interest in the diseases that are being caused by big pharma and big ag. And so it's wonderful that Kennedy suspended his candidacy and went over to Trump because he said he wants to end the Ukraine war, which is the biggest disease on the planet right now. It'll destroy all of us unless it's stopped. And yet the maniacs in the Democrat Party want more war. It's amazing. They used to make believe they were peaceniks. Now all they do is want war. Mad people. I want to protect free speech. But most of all, I'm interested in the millions of American children who are being poisoned to death. And Kennedy did a great job on that. And he also talks about something else I should mention to you, which is an explosion of neurological diseases in children that we never saw as a kid. Remember, he was born in 1954. I would guess he was raised somewhat in one of his family. He must have read Adele Davis. His mom probably read Adele Davis and raised him on some healthy foods. I was born in 1942. I was not raised on anything but the most horrendous diet in the world. I wrote about this comedically, that if I were to give this diet that I was raised on as a child in the 1940s, I could kill most people in a laboratory within 10 years. Because I was raised on a horrible diet. But they didn't know any better. They thought that more meat, more dairy, more sugar, more food, was better for the kid. They had no idea what they were doing because they came from poverty, and they thought when you had money, you were supposed to eat until you choked on it. So I want to talk again for a moment now about neurological diseases, because this is a frightening one. And I never saw anything like ADD as a child. I never saw ADHD. I never saw language delay. I never saw speech delay. I never saw Tourette syndrome. I never saw narcolepsy. I never saw ASD. I never saw Asperger's or autism in children. In the year 2000, the autism rate was 1 in 1,500. Now, autism rates in kids are 1 in 36. Did you hear that? According to the Centers for Disease Control, if you want to call them that. How is it that 1 in every 22 kids in California has autism? And that 77% of our kids are too disabled to serve in the United States military. Can you believe this? How did this happen? Why is this not a subject for everybody? Well, maybe it will be now that Kennedy has come along and taught us that in California, 1 in 22 kids, 1 in 22 kids, 1 in 22 kids. How did this happen? How is this possible? How is it happening? How could so many children be sick? Can so many parents be ignorant of the relationship between diet and health? Sometimes I go to a local cafe or a local market, particularly after 3:00 when the kids come home from school. So I just like to hear the sound of the children. I used to be a teacher. I love to hear their voices. It's a beautifully It's a cheerful thing to hear young children how happy they are. And I see what the kids are eating. They're buying junk food, potato chips. They're buying danishes, pastries, chocolatey stuff. I don't get mad. I don't walk over like a lunatic and talk to them. I don't say a word. But there are no parents trying to say to them, "Don't eat that poison. It'll get you sick, kid." Because the mothers were raised on it. The fathers were raised eating this stuff. When you think about it, if a kid is 10 or 13 years old, so the mother is how old? 35, 40? Well, they were raised on the same junk diets, so the parents don't know any better. So you have to go back to the elders of the tribe, like Michael Savage, who, by some miracle, I'm still alive. It's not really by accident. I've watched my diet very carefully. I was a fanatic when my kids were young. I was really very difficult in the house because I wouldn't let an ounce of sugar pass on my table. Not one. I mean, it was a little too much. I understand that. But I was obsessed with sugars. I was obsessed with colorings in foods. We ate a lot of health foods. We watched ourselves. And yeah, we'd go over the bridge to Chinese restaurants and eat Chinese dreck once in a while. The kids like that more than anything. And I wasn't overly strict. We were not vegans. We were not vegetarians because I knew the children needed a high amount of protein for their brains to develop. And it was very interesting when my kids were young to see what went on. If we had families over who were vegetarians, they called it then, and we were not, and we'd have mixed foods on the table like salad, vegetables, and let's say there was also some chicken. It wouldn't be deep fried chicken. It would be probably roasted chicken. And we cut it up in a platter and put it on a table. And there were other, let's say, animal proteins in addition to the vegetables. The vegetarian kids, their eyes would go crazy for the protein, and they reach for it, much to their mother's admonitions of don't eat that food because the kids needed it. They were screaming for it. And our kids ate it. That's why my kids are smart. They were never mentally deprived of the amino acids necessary for the development of a healthy brain. So, you could observe from your children themselves, but you have to control them. Children don't know what to eat. They don't know what to eat. And they will tend to gravitate towards the junk food, the potato chips, and the sweets, as you well know. That's just something kids do. But I would wager a guess that most of you would not let your dog eat the food that you feed your children. I would wager a bet that most women in America today feed their dogs better than they feed their children. I would wager a guess that most women listening, well, not listening to me, but most women in America today feed their cats better than they would feed their child if they have a child. And I'm not here to knock girls who don't have children. I mean, we have gone to the dogs. The saddest thing on earth today is to see a young, beautiful girl pushing a baby carriage with a dog in it. If we haven't died as a society, I'd like to know what symbolizes it better than a young girl pushing a baby carriage with a dog in it, or two dogs in it. It's unbelievable. But that's for them to deal with, not me. So as I say, diet first, food first. But let's look at the first paragraph of this book. I'm not going to do the whole book with you today. I'm just telling you I want to talk about it. I've been with you about 25 minutes, and I'm going to not be here much longer on this particular subject. When the book comes out, I'll come back on the air and I'll tell you how to buy it. You can't buy it now except maybe as a used book. Listen to this carefully. This is the first paragraph of the book about cancer. Cancer. Do I get your attention yet? Cancer, a leading cause of children's death. One of the most suppressed statistics is that more children under the age of 15 die of cancer, including leukemia, than of any other cause aside from accidents. This is why I became obsessed with, food and health for my kids. This alarming fact is reason for worry, but not despair, because there is now a trend away from, quote, a magic bullet approach to cancer toward the preventative concept of altering environmental factors associated with certain cancers. And I talk about cancer is multifactorial in origin. And then I said pediatricians often are uninformed about nutrition. It's still true, by the way. And then I talked about food the best medicine, how to feed during illness, which is often overlooked. I remember I learned when I was in grad school, I went back for a PhD late in life. I earned 2 master's degrees in different fields when I was younger. And then I went on for a PhD at University of California at Berkeley, which had the best human nutrition department in the country. And my professors, they were all medical doctors, taught me something. One of them taught me something very interesting. They all taught me something different, but one of them taught me something extremely interesting. One of the thesis chairmen, I forget which one of the great men it was, said to me, Michael, he said, I've seen children in hospitals who were dying of one thing or another, and the mothers would come into the hospital, and the doctor would say, well, your child's dying from cancer. And the mother would say, no, my child's starving to death. My child's dying of starvation. And the moral of the story is that those mothers were the reason hospitals changed the diets from the garbage that the hospital diets were at that time to the better diets that they are today. They're not great, but they're better. And that's because the mothers knew more about the child than the doctor. The mother saw the kid was starving to death and said, you better feed my child. And the mother would bring food in because the kid was dying not of cancer, but of starvation. Why? Because the hospital diet was deficient in sufficient nutrients for the child to live. I learned that in graduate school, and I'm talking about when? When did I get my PhD? 1978. I was working on it in 1977, between 75 and 77, 78. I learned it in those years, and certainly diets have changed since then. And then studies came along, which were great studies. There was a doctor at Kaiser in Oakland, I forget his name, and he had a huge bestseller, to his credit, showing the relationship between sugar and hyperactivity. And it went around for a while. Everyone understood. Does anyone know his name? If I'm looking at the comments, do anyone remember that doctor? I have forgotten his name. And he showed the relationship between sugar and hyperactivity syndrome. And as a result, people started to stop dumping sugar on their children, pastries and what. And so the kids got better, and there was much less of the hyperactivity. And then along came the brainwashing by the pharmaceutical industry. I watched it happen slowly but surely. In that era, there were also some great men like Linus Pauling who were around. Linus Pauling was around, and he did great work on vitamin C. And I met him. I learned from them. I had some great friends in the orthomolecular medical field, Dr. Richard Cunyon, who I've written about, Dr. Robert Cathcart, who I've written about, Abe Hoffer, another great man. Those of you who have been around long enough to know these names. These were the giants. But what happened was they were all preaching how to heal yourself with foods and nutrition and nutrients rather than with big pharma. And as a result, big pharma started spending a fortune trying to prove all of their studies to be false. Do you understand how it worked? Just as they've been trying to submit us to the big lie about politics, that we're all wrong about their oppression of our freedoms, they were doing it about food at that time. So I watched it happen. And they started putting out false studies about vitamin C, false studies about vitamin E, false studies about everything that was good and cheap. And that's what Big Pharma did. And they appeared as news stories, just as political stories today appear, which are, quote, objective news stories, when they're nothing but propaganda placed by the Democrat Socialist Party of America. So some things, what was it, Dr. Ben? No, it was not Dover. It was Ben somebody. It was a Jewish doctor with a Jewish last name, an Eastern European Jewish name. I don't remember his name. I could find it in two minutes. If you don't know it, please, it wasn't Dr. Spock. No, it wasn't Dr. Spock. So, folks, I'm giving you a little background to all of this. And I can't remember his name. It was Dr. Ben Feingold. Ben Feingold. See, my memory didn't fail me. I haven't thought of him in 30 years. Dr. Ben Feingold wrote a study. He had conducted a small study, clinical study, in amongst the children at Kaiser in Oakland. And he found that when he took the kids off sugar, their hyperactivity syndrome disappeared completely. That's what it was. So when the Feingold diet came along, a lot of mothers followed it and they cut sugar out of the diets of the kids, and the kids got better. They weren't exhibiting hyperactivity syndrome. And then the big pharma started going crazy with, you got ADD, you got ADHD, you need Ritalin. That's what they're putting them on then. Then they're putting kids on, Adderall. You know how many kids are stoned on Adderall today? What percent of it teenagers are on it? Do you realize what happens after a child is put on Ritalin or Adderall in their formative years? Their brain starts to need speed. And so what do they do when they become teenagers? You can't figure it out? They become addicted to speed, cocaine, amphetamines, etc. They become drug addicts. It's all connected to how they're formed when they're young and their brains are being formed. So, what I'm telling you is very important for you and for your children. And again, Healing Children Naturally is a great gift to humanity. And I hope to reissue it shortly. When I say shortly, it's not going to be tomorrow. But I remember why I wrote the book, because it was in that first paragraph that I read to you before. I just want to go back to it for a minute. The cancer, a leading cause of children's death, including leukemia. One of the most suppressed statistics is that more children under the age of 15 die of cancer, including leukemia, than of any other cause aside from accidents. This scared me to death when I had a young child. What is a parent's greatest fear? Is a child's going to get sick or die. And if you've seen children suffering from leukemia in the wards of hospitals, you'll understand what I'm talking about. It's a horrible thing to see. Okay? Horrible thing to see. So you have to understand, of course, there's a genetic factor. I'm not denying that. I'll tell you something else I learned in graduate school from one of my great professors that you haven't heard except from me. Health is a pie. It's not one single thing or one magic bullet that's going to change the course of an illness. Health, I was taught, is a pie. And look at it as a simple pie in three parts. One part is a genetic. What you inherit through your genes is about 1/3 of the outcome of your health in your life. The next third of that is the environment, meaning what you put in your yap, what you drink, what you eat, the air you breathe, and the water you drink, and other things you drink. So 1/3 is genetics, which you cannot control. 1/3 is the environment, which you can totally control. And then there's another third, boys and girls, that you don't know about, which is the unknown. And I had my professor teach me when I was there, when I was gung-ho on nutrition saving the world. And the doctor said to me, Michael, he said, look, I've done autopsies and I've seen people dead of heart disease in their 30s, and their arteries were 100% clear and they were dead of a heart attack. I said, great, thank you very much for that one. So, that's where the other element comes in that I want to tell you about, that is a big part of my life, which is God, faith, and reason, and prayer. But that I've done a lot with my God talks, Moses talks, and such. I don't want to do that again right now, but remember that whole harmony of prayer. Notice what I did with the harmony of prayer. Look, harmony of prayer, heart, mind, body, cosmos, heart, mind, body, cosmos, connecting to the universe. Very big factor in health. It's not a magic bullet. It's not a diet. Tune in, turn on, that kind of thing. So Guru Mike is finished for the day. And I remember thinking in the years I was doing talk radio, and just conservative talk radio, and I was saying, I'm not going to talk about health at all until I'm 80. And the reason is because I didn't think I'd make it to 70, let alone 80. I never thought I'd make it to 40, let alone 50, let alone 60. And, each decade came along faster than I could ever imagine. It is a blur, I will tell you that. It is a blur. And so I said at 80, I think I have the right to talk about health, not only from my research and my writings, but from my own personal experiences. But remember, please remember, one's personal experiences have nothing to do with teaching about health and longevity, because you need to look at large studies of hundreds of thousands of individuals in order to draw any rational conclusion for a population at large. So whether let's say you had an uncle who lived to 95 and he smoked cigarettes and he drank and he ate beef jerky every day. He's a nutritional rogue. That's what I call him. Donald Trump is a nutritional rogue. Okay, cheeseburgers, hamburgers, French fries, and Diet Coke. He's a nutritional rogue. He's got the genetic blessing. He's almost immune to anything he puts in his body. That's why he's a strong guy. He's got the genetics. But you can't follow that diet and expect not to get sick, okay? So before I go, I think I should tell you that one of the things I have done for over 40 years religiously, let's see, is the vitamins I take. Everybody wants to know, what vitamins do you really take? Well, I do take. I take mega doses of vitamins. I have mega dosed on ascorbic acid powder for 45 years, maybe more. At least 40 years. I don't remember how long, at least since the 70s. I've been taking mega doses of vitamin C. But what I must tell you about vitamin C is that vitamin C is not all active. Much of the pills you buy are chalk. They're garbage. There's no activity at all. You're wasting your money. I happen to use vitamin C powder. I'm not going to show you a brand. I'm not here to advertise anything. And I have taken a couple of grams a day for 40 years, and I find it to be remarkable in its effects. So I take mega doses of vitamin C. I also take a high amount of very high quality vitamin E every day. Again, I want to quote a study. The Shute brothers, Shute, look them up. They were two brothers in the early 1950s who found a relationship between vitamin E and the prevention of heart disease. And then, of course, Big Pharma came along and tried to say that vitamin E is not only not good for you, it's bad for you. They did the same thing with vitamin C. They did it with vitamin E. They're liars. It's all disinformation. It's like a Soviet campaign to make sure that you that you get sick and that you go to a pill pusher and that you buy a drug. It's that simple. I've taken other vitamins. I take a multivitamin. I'm not going to tell you the brand. I take some other vitamins as well. And I've been fairly lucky in my health outcomes. Not entirely lucky. I say I'm very lucky because I got to 79 before I got a minor heart attack. I wouldn't say minor. It's the only disease I ever had that landed me in a hospital was a heart attack when I was 79. But remember, my dad died in his 50s, my grandfather in his 40s. And I used to say, well, okay, but maybe in the old country, great-grandfather lived to 100. And then it took me years to find out that, no, he lived into his 30s. So I have the world's worst inheritance with regard to heart disease. And that is why I was always running scared and studying health. I was asked today on that radio show, what got you into the health world? I said, how about fearing dying at an early age with young children? I didn't want to leave children on the earth to care for themselves. You know what I'm saying? So I've always looked. I mean, I went far and wide for the answers. And went very far and very wide for the answers, including all the way into the tropics. Let's see, I'll get you a nice picture of the tropics. There's Mrs. Whippy. She taught me some of her healing English sea captain father, Fijian mother. Look at those hands. That's one of my favorite photographs. The healing hands of Mrs. Whippy. If there was a rational society, the book would have won a Nobel Prize and the photograph would have. But, I'm not the right political side of the coin. And there we go. Here's a healer I studied with. I remember the day, and she died the next day. That was an interesting story. She came from one of the outer islands. I forget her name, rest her soul, because the women all knew I was in the villages to study their healing plants. And they would go through the grapevine, and people would come from around the villages and give me the healing power. Rite Biu, divulging her remedies one day before her death, Vanuatu, 1971. I got chills up my spine. I remember she came and she told me all of her remedies. And then I heard afterwards she died the next day. There was my good friend, Domenico Corvembo, teaching me about a poisonous plant. Remember that one? Sinuganga, Excoacaria agalochia. The white sap of this coastal shrub causes blindness on contact, yet when smoked over an open fire is an effective remedy against stonefish poisoning. I mean, things like that. See, if you live in the islands for 10,000 years and you learn to make your medicines from the plants, from the sea creatures, from the minerals. You learn how they work, through trial and error. So they do know an awful lot about natural healing. I remember I met King Tupou IV of Tonga. This man was an amazing man. He was fascinated by herbal medicine in his own islands, and he heard that there was a young ethnobotanist in Tonga who was studying it, and he wanted to meet me. It was an incredible meeting. He was a remarkable man. He weighed like 350, and he was a surfer, incidentally. Interesting. And many of you have heard about kava kava, and here's the Yangona ceremony in the village of, where was this? Here we go. Pardon me for the best I can do. Kava kava in a village. Those are great days. They were wonderful people. And that was the Yangona ceremony on Gamea Island, by the way. And God, there was so many things I brought back. And these plants, these hundreds of plants that I collected were collected in 7 different sets. That's what you call botanical specimens. You make 7. Let's say this is a healing plant, and Mrs. Lau taught me how to use this plant to treat a scabby infection. So you collect 7 different herbarium specimens of the same exact plant, put them in 7 different, let's say, special things, bring them back to the kiln and dry them. And then you put labels on them, what you collected, what the woman said they're for, what the Latin name is, and all of that, if you can find it. And you send them out to the museums, and they go out to 7 museums in the world. So my basic collections are in 7 museums of the world, dispersed throughout the museums by philo or by family. The only intact collection of all the plants in one place is there's one collection in Kew Gardens in England, which I can't visit because of politics, if you can believe that. They let people in to cut other people's throats, but I can't go visit my plants in Kew Gardens. And the other collection is in Berkeley at the University of California in the Jepson Herbarium. Thank goodness it wound up in a safe haven here in the state of California where it belonged. And here is a little writer, Gift of New Ethnobotany Collection to UC Jeps was written up. This is one of my specimens. That's what it looked like, by the way, with my original label right there. Interesting. And in the fall of 2022, the Herbaria received a special donation of 149 plant specimens from Fiji. The specimens were collected from 1971 through 1973 by Dr. Michael Weiner during his PhD research on nutritional ethnomedicine, blah, 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 worked for gene healers, etc. Weiner holds master's degrees from the University of Hawaii in medical botany, medical anthropology, and a PhD from UC Berkeley in health and medical science. Okay, so with a generous gift to the Herbaria Futures Endowment Fund and additional gift to support a UC Berkeley student, blah, 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 the specimens are now being mounted, databased, and imaged. It is our pleasure to now be the stewards of this collection. I want to thank everyone there for this remarkable acceptance of my collection, if I've not done so before, and I don't know how many of you are listening to this. And then there are other things to talk about at another time. This is not the right time, but these collections are also in Germany, in Berlin, in Moscow, in the Moscow Herbarium, if I can recollect. I don't remember where else they may be. New York Botanical Garden, Chicago Field Museum, and the others that I had mentioned. So they're good. They're there. And here I am. I'm here with you. And because RFK Jr. came along and woke America up to the poisons in our foods and big pharma's lies to America, which we knew during COVID. I mean, look, you think I was blind to Fauci? When Trump was president, I was begging Trump to fire Fauci over and over again. I had his ear. There's no talking to them. I said, get rid of the people running the NIH, get rid of the people doing it there. It was too big a job. No one can come along and save the world in one administration. So that's the story of that one. It wasn't that Trump didn't do the right thing. He couldn't do everything at once, and he was blocked every step of the way. He should have fired Fauci, and we all know that. I said it in 2016, 17, 18, 19, 20, and it fell on deaf ears. So again, I'll close where I began and tell you the good news, which is that because RFK Jr.'s address to the nation on Big Pharma and Big Ag has awakened the nation, and I was then excited to dig into the old library and pull out Healing Children Naturally, which was originally published. By the way, it's an interesting story how this book came to be. This edition was published in 2007 by my own publishing company. It was originally published for the art of the art of feeding children well in New York, and it was a horrible relationship with that New York publisher. The book was stolen. The lawyer was someone, I hope he's dead by now. I don't want to go into it. What a bastard that lawyer was. Try to steal a book from me. That was a long time ago. The things I've walked on hot coals to be where I am today. And so, my friends, here I am. It's been a long, long path to this day. And I always felt that the books would be my legacy. And now it's not only the books, it's also the plants, which, because I documented these plants, a future researcher can go and find that plant in the wild somewhere in the tropics and bring the plants back to a laboratory and try to extract some healing property or component, rather, from either the leaves or the sap or the roots or the bark and turn it into a medicine for the world. So that's the way it is. I've given my best, and I hope it's not, not like a swan song here. I'm tired. I'll be honest with you. I'm really exhausted. It's the end of a long summer. I've not taken a vacation, really. I just don't feel like going anywhere. I don't enjoy going anywhere. It's all the same to me. At the end of the day, I'd rather be in my own bed around my own books. I have much better control over my life when I have my books to refer to or things I want to research on the internet. I mean, I could do it on a laptop. I get it. But I really love coming on YouTube, which I could do on a laptop. I could take a vacation any day I want and take my laptop and broadcast from a mountaintop or from a boat. I can do that. But maybe I will. I usually go on vacation, by the way, after Labor Day when the crowds are gone. I'll go somewhere. I went to Florida, but I worked. I went to Florida. I certainly did. I have a house in Florida. I don't want to be there now. It's too hot. But I want to be there next month. It's hot there till October. It's okay. I want to be there to see my friends and to see my family. And I'll be there soon, God willing. And, I'll do a show from Florida. Maybe we'll talk from Florida at some point in the future. And again, just to end, I have some publishers who want to reissue the book. If we don't come to good terms, I'm just going to have it reprinted and distributed so you can buy it directly from someone without my having to, put my hands on it. There are different companies now. They could print, publish, and distribute by the book. So it's ready to go. And if I can strike a deal with someone, I will. But I think after Labor Day, we'll reissue the book. How soon it can be done, I don't really know. And it'll be out for you to get, to help yourself. Again, women, you don't have to suffer with postpartum depression. It's 100% nutritional, incidentally. Do not take drugs. Maybe I should end on that note because so many women are getting suicidal after they give birth that women are afraid to have babies now because the doctors are poisoning them, putting them on drugs. So let me conclude about the subject of the issue of nutritional factors in postpartum depression. Let's see. Diet to improve fertility. Women used to get good advice from relatives. Some pregnant women eat clay, dirt, ashes, etc. They were looking for minerals, incidentally. That's an interesting story. And that's food cravings during pregnancy and why women have them. And they were eating crazy things. So I talk about that. And I don't know if I can find this on postpartum depression. I'm pretty sure I can remember what it was. First 8 weeks of critical time. Feeding occurs across placenta. Only nutrients cross placenta, not menus. Changes in mother during first 3 months of pregnancy. Dramatic second trimester changes. Needs increase during last trimester. Ideal diet only an estimate. Ethnic differences reinforced. I want to pause on that for a minute. I was a pioneer in ethnic nutrition, which was I studied various diets based on ethnicity. One diet doesn't fit all. I can't go into everything I've done in 60 years in 60 minutes. So I can't find this thing on postpartum depression, but I'm pretty sure I remember. I'm talking about mother losing teeth. I think I'm getting to it now. Indian diet helpful. Food fascism disavowed. I coined that phrase, food fascism disavowed. See, I was into politics even then. Vegetarian women must have a B12 supplement. Women don't know that. Protein supplements not advised. Yeah, morning sickness treated with vitamin B6. That's a good one. I can't read the whole book to you right now, but I believe that there were some good studies. He's on nursing. Cow's milk evolved for rapid weight gain. Cow's milk is not good for the baby or you. Uh, Although there's fat and sugar in human milk, which is good. Colostrum contains immune substances. You all know that by now, why nursing is the best. The value of human contact, very important. Soy milk formula is not good. Scurvy in children fed only on cow's milk, when not to breastfeed, and things like that. I really cannot put my finger on this postpartum depression. And it's so good. The book is comprehensive. It's a little encyclopedia. So there you go, my friends. I'll just tell you one story, and then I'm going to say thank you for listening. And that was a pregnant mother losing all of her teeth during pregnancy. It's an interesting story. Here it is. I remember this distinctly. An extreme example of the consequences of a borderline deficiency occurred in one of my clients during an earlier pregnancy. Long before I came to know this woman, she had borne a child at great expense to her own health. She lost 16 of her teeth during pregnancy, and not one physician or even her dentist thought it was related to her pregnancy. Can you believe this? When she came to see me years later, we pieced the story together as follows. At the time, I was in nutritional practice. I was in nutritional practice for 2 years. This woman had always abhorred dairy products, exhibiting the classic symptoms of lactase insufficiency. That is, she did not have the enzyme lactase required to digest lactose or milk sugar. Therefore, she was unable to digest significant quantities of milk or dairy products, an extremely important source of calcium. When the developing fetus drew on the mother's calcium stores, which were already insufficient, she lost her teeth. In other words, the calcium was being drawn out of the teeth. As a postscript, the infant was born and lost all her teeth. Had the obstetrician or pediatrician or dentist attending this woman and her baby been aware of nutritional factors, they would have recognized the symptoms of lactase insufficiency and arranged for her to eat large quantities of fermented dairy products, which do not require that lactase be digested. Foods such as yogurt would have been capable of reversing the serious problem. Calcium supplementation should also have been recommended in the form of calcium magnesium tablets and or dolomite powder or pills. It's still current 40 years later. It's the best ever. It's the best book ever written on the subject, and I am going to reprint it. So it was published originally in 82, and then I republished it in 93, and then reprinted it in this edition in 2007, first Savage production printing in 2007. And with God's will, I'll have this book out within the next few months as a Savage production for you to order directly and get it delivered right to your house. Until that time, I thank you very much for listening. It's a godsend that Kennedy is going over to Trump. And I don't want to talk about politics right now because you can pretty much figure out what's going to happen anyway, no matter what. But nevertheless, RFK Jr. has raised the awareness of the relationship between big pharma, big agriculture, at the brainwashing and the destruction of our health. That's all I have to say. I thank you for being with me all this time. If you appreciate this, I appreciate your subscribing so you know when I'm going to do these, and also maybe sharing it with 10 other people that you know who may want to be watching this. Also, I would be remiss if I didn't tell you I have one of the best podcasts in the world, but because I'm not a famous athlete or someone with good abs, you will not know it. I don't show my muscles and beat people up, so I'm Michael, and Michael does it his way. But we have a great podcast just came out that you're going to have to listen to if you're at all political. It's called Project 2025. What is it? With Miranda Devine. It's a great podcast. It's incredible. Most of you don't know what Project 2025 is. You think it's Hitler's Mein Kampf, according to ABC News. It's the furthest thing from the truth. So I had a great discussion of it, and I opened up this subject to anyone who wants to study it with an objective mind. And it's seen anywhere that a great podcast can be heard, whether it be Apple or Spotify. I don't know where they're heard. Every platform in the world carries the Michael Savage podcast. And that's the end of the story. And I thank you for listening. Go to the podcast, hit the like button, and let's pray for America. Let's pray for Trump. Let's pray for RFK Jr. because the evil forces are gathering to make sure they don't get anywhere near the finish line. Okay, folks. Now it's time for me to have a little relaxation, a little R&R coming up. Thank you very much for listening. I'm Michael Savage saying bye-bye.